This is a Merrick Studios podcast.
Today's guest is Dr. Denise Brown. Denise has had a prestigious career as an entertainment attorney and dealmaker. A Buffalo, New York native, Denise started on Wall Street alongside the iconic Reginald Lewis. Pivoting to entertainment law at Minter, Gay & Brown, and being mentored by Kendall Minter, she went on to become Senior Vice President of Black Music at Warner Brothers. She's an ordained minister, professor at NYU's Clive Institute, and a Beasler Hall of Famer. This is Mixed and Mastered with Denise Brown. Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. Mixed and Mastered podcast with a music industry legend, Dr. Denise Brown. How are you, Denise?
I'm well, Jeffrey. It's so good to be with you today.
It's so good to have you. I've always really admired you. I'm always like, wow, that's Denise Brown. Wow, that's Denise Brown. I get to have this conversation with you. And
the feeling is mutual.
About your career and your life and everything. But let's get started from the top. I didn't know you were born and raised in Buffalo, New York.
Yes, Buffalo, New York.
Tell me about being raised in Buffalo.
You know, I had a great childhood in Buffalo. My parents had season tickets to the Bills games for 47 years, all 4 Super Bowls, and got their heart broken. But, you know, it was a great town to grow up in, a lot of culture. And I was there until I left for college.
Now, were you there? So you obviously were there during the OJ years. You saw him play?
Yes. He was on the team when I was growing up.
Wow. Now, I'm not trying to age you, so please, you can say nigga, shut up, if you want. But like, were you there during Frankie Crocker and like Rick James? Did you know them?
Oh yes,
living in.
Yeah.
Explain a couple of those stories.
Yeah. Rick's brother and I grew up together.
Wow.
And but the Buffalo community, it's funny when you're growing up there, you think it's this huge city, but it is. It's a huge city with a small town feel. So, a lot of strong sense of community. The Black community was very prominent, and it was, as I said, it was a great childhood.
Wow. So I also learned that you were a classically trained pianist. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I actually started piano lessons when I was 3 years old, and it was due to my grandmother wanted a musician for her missionary meetings that she would have at our house. I started piano lessons at 3, got a piano for my 4th birthday, started playing in the church when I was 7, and then moved over into classical while still continuing learning gospel, Christian music, learned how to play the B3, Hammond B3 organ so I could play in church. Started playing in musical theater at the Jewish Center in Buffalo. As I said, I was trained in classical, started to do competitions in high school. Yeah, so I always thought I was going to be a classical concert pianist.
You still play?
Unfortunately, I do not. I still have a grand piano, but it's back in Atlanta at a friend's house because it would not fit into my apartment.
I got you. So I'm assuming that must be part of where the music bug kind of struck you, learning to play piano, and did that kind of spark your interest in music in general?
Oh, absolutely. And, I came from a family of music lovers. My dad had a speaker in every room in the house, and I do mean every room. When he would do his constitutional in the bathroom, he was listening to music and listening to all types of music. He had an amazing vinyl collection, 8-track collection, and oddly enough, one of my favorite hobbies was reading album credits.
Mine as well. Yeah. I still do.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I met Herb Powers, the mastering guru, I bowed down because had read his name over the years. So I always wanted to know who mixed the record, who mastered, who wrote, who produced. So that was, that was a favorite hobby of mine.
Yeah, that helped me out in my career as well because, like you said, when you would meet people, and I start spitting off what they did. Oh, yeah, and they would be like, "Yeah, how do you know this?" I'm like, "Yo, because like you said, I would read the album, the backs of the album, start to see names multiple times. Like, oh, that person did that, and then that, and then that, and they wrote that, and you know, I didn't know what Joe Beck was, but I was like, what is Joe Beck publishing? That's something. Like I started learning, so I was the same way, you know. So tell me about getting to NYU and starting school.
Well, you know, it's interesting. When I was in high school, starting to apply to colleges, I was applying to all of the conservatories. So Juilliard, Oberlin, Eastman, you know, in hopes of majoring in piano performance and going on to be this concert pianist. And at the time, Andre Watts was the only successful Black concert pianist in this field. So my parents, in their wisdom, said, we're not paying for you to go to conservatory. So at the same time that I came to audition at Juilliard, I auditioned at NYU. And at the time, NYU was one of 3 universities in the country that had a music business program. I think it was NYU, University of Miami, and maybe Berkeley. Went to NYU, auditioned, and, you know, it's interesting. My love of reading album credits really enamored me to the program because it allowed me to continue my piano performance, take business classes at Stern Business School at NYU, and then have classes specifically geared toward the music business. So that's how I ended up there.
Wow. And then, so you graduate from there.
Yeah.
Now, do you intern anything? You just go right to, let's say you went to Brooklyn Law as well. Do you go right to Brooklyn Law? Did you intern in between? And also, where did you live when you were living in NYU? You live on the campus or you like living?
Yeah, I lived in Greenwich Village, and then my last year I moved to Brooklyn. But yes, I did intern, and having an internship was one of the requirements for graduation. So I ended up it was called CBS Records in the Black Rock building on 53rd. And first internship was with Steve Backer and Barry Levine in college promotion.
Wow.
So it was amazing. And, you know, I remember so many acts were broken out of that department, like the Goo Goo Dolls, Psychedelic Furs. You know, it was a very robust division of their marketing department. And so worked there for a full year for Steve and Barry, ran back into Steve. He was president of Giant Records when I went to Warner Brothers. So he always loved to take credit that he was the one who discovered and made me.
Yeah.
So, you know, that year that I was at CBS, met a lot of different people, a lot of executives, and it was just fortuitous because so many people that I met during that first year, I ended up representing over the years.
I bet.
Got Folks was A&R at the time. I met Kendall Minter, who ultimately trained me in entertainment. Van Gibbs, who was a producer, and I ended up representing Van and his son Salam. But, you know, Scott was the first person to ever take me into a recording studio. He was doing a panel at Restoration in Brooklyn and invited me to come. So I'm in a Music Express car. Do you remember Music Express?
Absolutely.
My first time in a black Music Express car. And he picks up Kendall Minter and Van Gibbs. So I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I'm in the car with these 3 powerhouses. And so those were the type of people that Mike Bernardo, who was at CBS. And so once that internship was over, I ended up doing internships, Jeffrey, throughout the summer between graduating from college and going to law school and throughout law school. I like to say I was at every department in CBS Records. So A&R administration, legal, business. Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow.
CBS was my training ground.
Wow.
As an intern.
That's wild. And BlackRock so CBS.
Fire. Think about who was there. Walter Yetnikoff, Marvin Cohn. I mean, just, Walter Dean, who ended up being my angel. I met him on an elevator, and you never know who's watching you. And he had been watching me as an intern for almost 3 years. And he said, come to my office. And Walter Dean was probably number 2 under Yetnikoff?
Yeah.
And I went to his office and he said, what do you want to do?
You're like, me?
I quickly recovered.
Yeah, right? Wow.
I want to be an entertainment lawyer.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I can't say enough about being an intern. I mean, I talk to my students about that all the time.
Sure.
Being an intern and also having an answer because for what do you want to do? Because you never know who's watching you. Being in New York, you never know who you're going to run into on the subway, in Starbucks, and you have to be prepared to make.
Yes, because you can blow it or you connect with that person. Literally, that person can make one phone call and change the trajectory.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a great story. But I know you also, before you got into the music business, you worked at Wall Street.
Yeah.
And you worked at Wall Street in the mid 80s when Wall Street was, if you watched the movie, it was crazy. So I need to hear about you working on Wall Street in that era because it was crazy.
My God. I mean, it was a transformative, life-changing experience. I met Reg Lewis. He hired me. And it's interesting because when I met with Walter Dean, he said, okay, you want to be an entertainment lawyer? I can help you, but I strongly recommend that you go learn how to be a lawyer first before you specialize. And shortly after that, I met Reg Lewis. He offered me a job and I went to work for him. And when I went to work for him, it was one of the most exciting times on Wall Street. He had just purchased the McCall Pattern Company in a leveraged buyout. He sold the McCall Pattern Company and realized a 90-to-1 return on his investment for his investors. And then he won the auction a couple of weeks later to purchase the international divisions of Beatrice Foods. And it was a $1 billion leverage buyout. At the time, it was the largest LBO on Wall Street.
Wow.
And a Black man did that.
Wow. What kind of person was he? Like, you got to work with him and like you knew him. Like, what kind of person was he?
Wow. How much? I mean, that's so hard. I mean, he was driven. He was focused. He was smart. He was fearless.
He was that guy.
He was that guy.
Yeah. I remember I remember reading about him when he passed away and I was just like, wow, this guy is like, and he died really young. He died really young.
Yeah, he did, unfortunately.
Like if he'd have lived,
Yeah, there's a book on his life called Why Do White Guys Have All the Fun? And it's being turned into a movie.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Good. It's about time. What made you decide to make that switch from Wall Street, where, not getting your pockets, but I'm sure you were doing okay, into the music side of things?
It was really an exciting time. I spent 3 years working for Lewis and Clarkson, which was his law firm, and TLC Group, which was the LBO company, and got excellent training, was able to really kind of sit and watch, this major deal being done and history being made. At the same time, I maintained my relationships in the business that, I made during my internships at Sony, including with Kendall. Coincidentally, Kendall's office was around the corner from Reg's office. So we would meet every few months. And after the Beatrice deal, Kendall said, you made enough money. That's not why you went to law school. come work for me and I'll train you in entertainment law. Yeah, so I took my Beatrice bonus, and I remember telling Reg that I was leaving to go practice entertainment law, and he reminded me that the gross income of the company that he had just bought was larger than the entire music business. So in other words, yeah, flexing.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. Was he supportive in you leaving, or he was kind of like, you tripping?
Really? Like, you're tripping. Part was definitely in entertainment. And, it's interesting because what made me decide to go to law school was not my desire to be a lawyer. What's interesting, Dick Roderick was the head of the music business department at NYU. He was also a senior vice president at RCA Records. And in my junior year, he said to me, Denise, you'll have a lot more stability and credibility in the business if you go to law school. I had no intention of going to law school. And I thought about it and made the decision to go. And I remember calling my parents and saying, guys, guess what? I'm going to law school. And their response was, where's our daughter and what have you done with her?
So it just came out the blue to them.
But it was great advice. Great advice.
Because you were stable. You had your long career in the music. He was right. He was right. So how was it working with Kendall back then? Like, who were some of your clients?
Wow, Kendall at the time was probably one of the top entertainment attorneys in the business, and he was representing everybody. Coming to work with him, I was immediately thrown into the proverbial fire. And, Kendall was just so smart, so cool, calm, and collected. And no matter what happened, he always, rose to the occasion. I mean, he was representing everybody.
Did he pass off certain clients to you, or you just kind of supported him?
Well, I started out supporting him until I learned. And then my Beatrice bonus ran out after a couple of years.
You was fun. You was going on.
I need to make some real money. My money's running. And he said, you know what? You've already made the leap into private practice. So I'm going to give you an office and I'm going to give you 10 of my clients.
Wow.
Oh, no. Yeah. Kendall looked out. He gave me 10 of his clients. And these were clients that were in their infancy, right? Nothing was really happening for them. And this was his way of, get out there and grind. Yeah, and I will tell you that at least 5 of those clients became stars.
Can you name them for us?
I'll get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you was,
listen, Pete Rock and CL Smooth.
Wow. So you was doing your thing.
Yeah, and
you was doing your thing.
Yeah, Kendall was definitely my trainer, my incubator, my launch pad.
And what was your next step after moving on from Kendall?
What happened was, as you know, a lot of our music clients started to move into other areas of entertainment. And one of the things that I was always careful about was knowing my stuff, right? And so as they moved into other entertainment platforms, I joined a firm of counsel that was a full service entertainment firm. So that firm was Levine, Thal and Plotkin, and they did all types of entertainment. And it's interesting. There's so many people that came through that firm that I worked with. Bob Levine, Peter Fall, Fred Davis, Scott Francis, Warren Chadish. So it was a great place to be. We had beautiful offices at 1740 Broadway, right across the street from the Universal building. So it was a well-worn path.
I know there. 1755, 1740, 1750. I wanted to ask you, one of the things I've always admired you as you're obviously a Black woman and you're a powerful Black woman attorney, and you've always been able to, in my opinion, kind of position yourself in different spaces I guess for lack of a better term, kind of like the more white spaces. But you never lost your blackness, but you were always able to kind of position yourself to be able to in a position to help people and learn. And I always wanted to ask you, how was there a method to that madness, or was it just you working hard and kind of can put there, or was it a strategy?
I'm going to say there was a strategy. Well, I'm sure God had a strategy for me. But, I think it was strategic to go work with Kendall because everybody's not a trainer. Kendall was a trainer, and he always took the time to teach me.
That's true.
Levine, Thal, and Plotkin was a great firm. As I said, they did all types of entertainment. So I was able to either form strategic alliances with them for certain deals that I did and learn at the same time. I've had great mentors in the business, especially entertainment lawyers, and they weren't just Black lawyers. Like Joe Sterling was a great mentor to me.
Really? Wow, I remember him.
And even when I was young, because I was 27 years old when I started practicing entertainment. And, rather than beating me up, if I was asking for the wrong thing, they would say, "Oh, no, Denise, you don't really want to ask for that. You want to ask for this." So that, I found that to be very helpful. Now, there were a lot of knuckleheads at the same time. I was very fortunate to have people that really kind of poured into me.
Good, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna ask this one question and I'm gonna move forward. So tell me how it was for this young 27-year-old Black woman lawyer, got a couple pennies in your pocket, living in Manhattan or in New York City, get to Brooklyn, wherever. Like, how was it on the I guess what's the word I'm looking for? You like partying, hanging out.
I can't tell all the stories.
We're not talking about the work right now. I know you. I don't want you to incriminate nobody. I don't want you to tell nothing you don't want to tell. But like, I just know that like there was a crew of y'all, and I won't say no names, but there was a crew of y'all that was all in the entertainment in one way or another. You guys were doing well. You were fly. You were looking good, and I always thought that was fascinating to see y'all. And y'all had again, you had your money. You had your club. You were moving around. You were going to the clubs and traveling. And what was that like? And I just want to know a little bit about that.
Oh, and all over the world, which was great. Don Taylor was a mentor of mine, taking me to meet him, along with Kendall. It was our work and it was our hang as well, right? So we would work all day in the office, go out that night, rinse and repeat. And because we were young, I mean, that was just what we were doing. We were grinding it out. But I think it was also important to maintain my position, right? I'm not here to party, right? Party was a byproduct, but I'm here to work. And that was always my posture, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We had tons of fun doing it. I had this apartment on Atlantic Avenue. I don't know if you ever came to one of those parties, but it was in 2 top floors of a 3-story red brick building. And you had to climb out of my window in the kitchen to get to the roof. And that's where all the partying was happening. So no matter who you were, how many coins you had, or what your record was doing, you had to climb out that kitchen.
That window. Yeah, get your pants dirty a little bit.
And we'll be right back.
I'm Bun B. I'm a host and a co-owner at Merrick Studios, and we just took things to the next level. Merrick Studios Plus is live, so tap in at wearemerrickstudios.com, get 65% off, and don't just listen, be a part of the show.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show.
I remember, first started going to Jack the Rapper. I was working at a small label called Wild Pitch. Yeah, so we didn't have no money. And, you know, we just
Mm-hmm.
kind of moving around. And then when I started to work at Jive, Barnell Johnson, he hired me. And I remember going to Jack the Rapper with him.
Yeah.
And it was like a whole nother world that I didn't even know what's going on. There's like, you know, I entered this other world being with him and, you know, seeing yourself and, I'm trying to think of some names off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Top promo guys. I'm like Hank Span and all those guys, like wow, this is amazing. Like all these powerful people, you know, and I really got to start to learn how things really worked at that level, at that major label level, you know, kind of the deals that were being cut and stuff. It was fascinating, which is why I wanted to ask you that question, because you were living that, you know. I wanted to ask you that question.
The business was very relational, right? And, you know, I was so fortunate to have so many great mentors. Sylvia Rome was a tremendous mentor for me. Gene Riggins, Cassandra Mills, you know, I can't say enough about them. But, you know, and I think that is probably one of the things that's missing in the business now, is just having that experience and wisdom pouring in, you know, to what's happening now in the business. Because some things change, but some things remain the same, right?
Yes. And that's why one of the reasons I started to do this podcast is because, like, all those people, and yourself included, like, you're like superheroes to me. So I was like, I want to do this podcast where these people can tell their stories and people can understand like how much they shaped the culture. You might not know their names, but like what they were doing behind the scenes was literally shaping the culture.
That's exactly
and still
right.
To this day, that culture still resonates, you know? Yeah. So let's skip a little bit forward to talk about you entering in to Warner Brothers. So tell me how that happened.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I went to one of the top entertainment firms in New York, Mayer, Katz, Baker, Leibowitz, and Roberts. And I was the youngest. They had a substantial institutional practice. They had a talent practice as well, but I think they recruited me because of my talent practice. I was the first Black partner. I was the only female partner there. And it was an exciting time. I think one of the reasons, and from there, I was recruited to go to Warner Brothers. And I think, you know, one of the reasons that I was recruited to move into a record company was the fact that I built my practice using my creative ear. Because as you said, I was this young woman just starting out. Nobody knew who I was, and really kind of, you know, make investments and place my bets on people, saying, you know what, I can get this person a record deal, or this person is going to be a star, or this executive is going to, you know, rise through the ranks. Yeah. You know, I was finding talent early. And, you know, that was attractive, I think, to, you know, the powers that be. So I was recruited to come run the Black music division at Warner Brothers Records in Los Angeles.
Okay, we're going to get to that. So can you tell us a couple of the talents that you found that, you know, that became successful that made them want to recruit you?
And Howie T, who, you know, lived around the corner from me in Brooklyn. You know, I would go to his studio, and I mean, Howie was making incredible beats and making great records, but really not getting the recognition that he deserved, you know, and really, you know, just kind of helping people elevate, if that makes sense. You know, that was there. You know, Eddie F with Untouchables, with Heavy D, but Eddie F went on to build this infrastructure to incubate other producers and songwriters and artists. You know, Busta Rhymes, who kind of went out on his own and started his solo career. Yeah, so, you know, people like that. I mean, I think, you know, being a part of their elevation. Yeah.
I didn't know you worked with Howard.
Yeah, and Howard came with me actually to want to do A&R.
Wow. Yeah, he was you can say he doesn't get the props that he deserves. Like he did a lot, but you know, people kind of skip I don't know. They just kind of he's kind of under the radar in a weird way, but he did some amazing things. You know,
Color Me Bad,
Special Ed and Kid and Play. Like he was dope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Call Me Bad. That's what I'm saying. He was dope. So tell me about moving to LA to work for Warner Brothers. I look at you. You got to figure out what to say and what not to say.
It was funny because Sylvia Rohn actually recommended me for the job. At the time, Danny Goldberg was chairman of Warner Brothers, and met with him and was really excited about joining the company. And in my mind, I thought that I would be able to run the division from New York. And in fact, Danny was running the company commuting between New York and LA. You know, Sylvia said to me, no, you can't run a division from a satellite office. You got to go to LA. And LA was never one of my favorite places. I just love New York. And I remember having lunch with Ron Sweeney at China Grill, and we were standing China Grill. And he said, go. If you don't like it, you can always come home. And believe it or not, Howie T drove me to the airport. Yeah.
Really? Wow. So I got to ask you a little cool question. How bad did it hurt to give up that apartment in Brooklyn?
I kept it.
Oh, you kept it?
I kept it. I kept that apartment.
Oh, man.
Literally with one. Wow. So tell me about that. Yeah, exactly. I ain't staying out here. Tell me about that, starting the black music, running the black music division at Warner back then. You guys, and some of the artists your
roster was
I represented Prince as his attorney before I went to Warner Brothers.
Wow.
And then, so when I got to Warner Brothers, he was signed there as an artist, and he was going through the whole period of, protest and rebellion. He had slave written on his face. Yeah. And came in. Eric Benet was one of our artists. RBX was an artist. Something for the People. Not Enough. Yeah. So Kevin Campbell was recording for the
Was Kevin Campbell there at that time?
And then we did Curtis Mayfield's last record, New World. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
No,
was Albie Shore there too?
No.
He wasn't. Yeah. Okay. Can you give me one Prince story without, telling too much? I gotta ask. It's Prince. You know what I'm saying? I gotta ask. And I know you had a really great relationship with him. I get this one little something. It could be anything. I don't care.
I had just gotten to Warner Brothers, and Russ Durrett, who actually signed Prince to Warner Brothers, said, Prince is playing Wembley in London. Why don't you go over there, meet with him, go to the show? So I did. And he knew that I was at the show. I'm sitting in the audience, and he just decided to go on a rant about Warner Brothers while I'm in the audience. So I left.
Well, you ain't know what he...
That's the place for me. So he called me the next
day.
The show, and I was like, I left. I was like, I didn't think I was welcome there. And so he says, let's hang out tonight.
Yeah.
So he picks me up at midnight. It's pouring rain in London. And we're riding around in London in a car that had curtains around the windows, listening to all types of music. It was one of the best nights of my life. No, it was great. It was great.
That's incredible.
And after that, he decided to turn in a record to Warner Brothers.
Wow. So tell me about your plans when you got into running the black music video. What was your plans and what were your goals to
I was always known, although I did do R&B, I was known as a hip hop person, and I built my career on hip hop. And I don't know if you remember, but shortly after I got to Warner Brothers, maybe a couple of months, within 6 months of me coming to Warner Brothers, Doug Morris was let go as head of Warner Music Group. Danny Goldberg was let go as chairman of Warner Brothers. And they got out of the rap business by selling Interscope.
Was that due to the No, that wasn't due to the Ice-T controversy. Why did they get out of it?
It came before I was there, but Michael Fuchs, who ended up running Warner Music Group, he was head of HBO, made the decision to get out of the rap business by selling Interscope. So it sent a signal to the industry that we weren't in the hip hop business. And it was, particularly hard at Warner Brothers because during the whole Ice-T cop killer situation, they were getting bomb threats, they were getting death threats. So, it was really a sore spot for them. So I found myself kind of hanging out there, not being able to sign any rap.
Wow. What did you do?
Well, there was nothing to circumvent. We weren't in the rap business.
This was just out. Is it over? Wow.
Yeah.
And rap was taking off at this. It was really off.
It was very disappointing.
Wow.
I was there for.
How long were you there? How long were you at Warner? And what was it?
Well-deserved sabbatical. Yeah.
Okay.
I took 2 years off.
So
I had my first child while I was at Warner Brothers, a son, and I had never not worked since I left law school. So quickly moved back to New York. I did not keep that apartment to my regret. I actually tried to buy the building and wasn't able to, wasn't successful in doing that. So I ended up moving out to Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. Ended up being a suburban mom for a couple of years. Yeah,
soccer mom.
And, it was an interesting time because I deliberately stepped away from the business. I really wanted to know what my place was because Warner Brothers was a great experience for me, a big education about the business. I approached, when I did go back into practice, I approached my practice in a totally different way, particularly as it related to representing executives. But being away from the business allowed me to look at the business with a fresh eye, if that makes sense. And I looked at it purely as a consumer. So a perfect example was going into one of these multimedia stores where I had video games for my sons, DVDs for me, of movies for me to watch, and CDs for me to listen to. And by the time I got to the register, I was putting some of those CDs back because it was like I've only heard one song. And if you remember, back in the day, we would promote records by putting out one single and then immediately putting out the record. So that was education for me. And as you see, the business kind of moved in that direction where, we had to expose more of the music for people to put their money down to buy records.
Yeah. We had to make the consumer earn it. We had to make them trust us and earn it. It's money, but you have to show you what you're buying with
that's right.
money.
That's right. So I took those 2 years to really, be a mom, figure out where my place was in the entertainment business. Was it as an executive? Was it as an attorney? And I decided to go back into practice.
Okay. And so tell me about that. Tell me about going back into practice.
It was great. One of the things that I realized about being an executive, particularly coming in running the division, was that I was more creative doing what I loved to do as an attorney. So running the Black music division at Warner Brothers, I was managing budgets and 7 vice presidents. And they were the ones that were having all the fun. They were the ones that were signing the artists, promoting the records, and not me. So, I made the decision to go back into practice. because that was where I was getting the most fulfillment.
So I wanted to ask you another question. I know you're heavily involved with
Mhm.
Beasla. When did Beasla start? Because I don't really know much of it, because I don't know the
Yeah.
history of it.
Beasla was founded by Kendall Minter and another one of my mentors,
I knew.
Wes, who was really like my North
Yes.
Star when I started practicing entertainment. She was the only other Black woman I knew that was an entertainment attorney on such a high level. But she and Kendall, and I believe Ron Sweeney, formed Beasla as an organization to really bring together Black entertainment attorneys.
I knew Kendall was a founder, but I didn't know about Ron
Yes.
and Louise as well. I didn't know about Ron and Louise as well. And so I know you're like in the Hall of Fame of Beasla now, correct?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Actually was the one who inducted me. That was a very special night.
Wow. That's special. Something else about you, before I wind this down, that I did not know. I did not know you went to theology school. Tell me that. I was like, what? Tell me about that. You're like a doctor of biblical studies, and I did not know that about you. That's fascinating to me.
Well, it's interesting. You never know what God has in store for you, right? So 20 years after graduated from law school, I was actually living in Atlanta, and there was a seminary near my home. And at the time, I really wanted to do a deeper dive into my Bible study. And I said, oh, I'll just go take some classes at the seminary. And, when they told me that I could get a degree, I've been told I have a type A personality. I said, okay, I'm going to get a bachelor's degree. And then it's like, well, you take a few more classes, you'll get your master's degree. And it's like, okay, I'm going to get my master's degree. And if you write this dissertation, you'll get a doctorate. And so that's what happened. And in the middle of that, I became licensed as a minister. And then shortly after getting my doctorate, I was ordained as a minister.
That's wow. So do you preach a lot? Do you preach it sometime at churches and stuff?
Yeah, during my training, I was preaching and teaching in Atlanta. What I do now is I have a monthly prayer call, and the name of my ministry is Oikeo, which is a Greek for the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. So every month we have a prayer call on the first Sunday. It lasts for 30 minutes, and we've expanded it now. So there's a prayer call just for men on the second Sunday of every month. And people from entertainment, people from all walks of life are on that call.
I might have tapped in. When I was researching, I had no idea that was part of your path. You're the first doctorate of biblical studies I've ever had on this show. That was amazing. The first pastor that I've ever had on this show. I'm going to wind it down with you talking about you teaching at the Clive Davis School.
Yeah, so moved back to New York in 2021, and Jason King was the chair of Clive Davis
on the show.
And Lauren Davis, who I came up through the business with, invited me to come on as an adjunct. And it has been a great experience. It's, so good to be able to have a full circle moment, going back to my alma mater, but also being able to pour into and equip this next generation of creatives, executives in the business. A lot needs to change in our business. And, I always say to my students, you have to learn the business in order to disrupt it. So I'm so honored to be there. I also am an adjunct at Marymount, Manhattan, teaching a music business course, and they just recently merged with Northeastern University.
Okay. But what do you with these new students that you teach? What are the differences maybe in your what you're seeing from kind of like the era that we came from? Like what obviously social media and stuff like that, but is there still like a thirst to be in the business, or is it more people want to be entrepreneurial, or like what are you kind of seeing the difference?
Yeah, I think the thirst is still there. I think that people are definitely more entrepreneurial. A lot of the creatives are not interested in signing to major labels. They are in the business while they are at NYU and Marymount. So in other words, they are taking advantage of the amazing studios that are at NYU. They're creating, they're releasing, they're marketing and promoting, they're forming alliances with their classmates. So it's really great to see. They are actually in the business.
Wow. I learned a lot. I got these always at the end of the interviews, always do these 3 questions segment. This is your 3 favorite. Give me your 3 favorite artists ever, like any genre. It's your call.
I can't do that. There's so many.
Can't pick 3.
Prince.
Okay.
Michael.
Okay.
John P. King.
Okay, I didn't see that coming. I worked with him. I didn't really work with him, but he was on. We had a job. We had a gospel label called Verity.
Yes.
He was on Verity. Yeah.
Yep.
So I didn't work with him because I would see him around and stuff. And I didn't realize until that label started how big he was. I didn't know. I kind of heard his name, but then I was like, oh wow, this guy is like way more influential than I thought he was. He was like a top tier figure in the gospel world.
Yes, it's been an honor to work with him for a number of years.
Yeah. Give me your 3 favorite. This is gonna be a tough one. Give me your 3 favorite classical pieces, music pieces.
Chopin Etude, WC Children's Corner. That's a piece that I competed.
Okay.
Oh, the third one. I would say the Bach Fugue.
Okay. And you're the first person. The last question is not going to be a 3. It's going to be a 1.
Okay.
Give me your favorite Bible verse.
Be anxious for nothing, but with prayer and thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. And the peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart in Christ Jesus.
Wow.
Philippians 4:6.
That's a great way to end this show. Thank you, Dr. Denise Brown. I really enjoyed that.
I enjoyed it too. Thanks so much for having me.
I learned a lot. I really did. I learned a lot. That was fun. You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.